My child. Come closer. Do not rush. Because tonight's story begins with something unusual. Not a fortune. Not a secret account. Not a mysterious document. Something far more valuable. A message. A message that was never supposed to disappear. A message that somehow survived years of silence. And tonight, for reasons nobody can fully explain, it has returned. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, some things remain hidden not because they are gone, but because their time has not yet come. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The evening was quiet. The house was peaceful. The kind of peaceful that feels almost too quiet. A man sat alone at his kitchen table. An old wooden box rested nearby. The box had been in the family for years. Perhaps decades. Nobody paid much attention to it anymore. Nobody thought about it. Nobody asked questions about it. It simply existed. Silent. Patient. Waiting. Jesus speaks softly. Time reveals what hurry often overlooks. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly that reminder tonight. Earlier that day, something unexpected happened. While searching for an old family photograph, he discovered a key. A small brass key. Hidden inside a drawer. A drawer he had opened hundreds of times before. Yet somehow, he had never seen the key. The room became completely silent. Because immediately, one memory returned. A memory connected to someone he loved deeply. Someone whose kindness shaped the family. Someone whose wisdom still influenced people years later. Someone who always said, "One day, you'll understand why I kept that box." The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, those words felt important. Very important. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, wisdom often returns through memories people thought were forgotten. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. He picked up the key, walked slowly across the room, and placed it beside the wooden box. For several moments, he simply stared at both objects. The key, the box, the memory, the mystery. Because something inside him felt certain. Not about what he would find, but that he was supposed to look. Jesus speaks softly. Curiosity often leads people toward understanding. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Before opening the box, his eyes landed on a familiar card tucked inside an old notebook. A card carrying a simple message. Return often to what strengthens hope. Some viewers may notice the QR code on screen, or the link connected with this message. For some people, those resources become places for reflection, prayer, encouragement, gratitude practices, and meaningful conversations. Others continue reflecting privately. Both approaches can be meaningful. Because wisdom often grows where reflection is welcomed. The room remained quiet. The key remained in his hand. And finally, he inserted it into the lock. A soft click echoed through the room. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everything changed. Slowly, he lifted the lid. Inside was not money. Not valuables. Not jewelry. Not legal documents. Only paper. Old paper. Letters. Carefully folded letters. Dozens of them. The room became completely silent. Because somehow, that discovery felt more important than anything else. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, words preserved with love often outlast material things. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. At the very top rested a single envelope, different from all the others. The envelope contained only 6 words. 6 words written carefully across the front. The words read, "Please read this one first." The room became completely silent, because suddenly, the mystery had begun. Some viewers may once again notice the QR code or link associated with this message. For some, those resources become places to continue reflecting, exploring prayer materials, gratitude practices, and encouraging conversations. Others continue their journey privately. Both paths can be meaningful, because meaningful growth often begins with a willingness to pause. Slowly, he reached for the envelope, his hands trembling slightly, his attention completely focused. And just before opening it, he noticed something written on the back. A sentence. A single sentence. A sentence that instantly made his heart race. The sentence read, "The truth was never hidden from you. It was hidden for you." The room became completely silent, because suddenly, everything changed. Comment this word if this message reached your heart. Remember. And type Part 2. Because Part 2 reveals what was inside the envelope, and why it changes everything he thought he knew about his family. Part 2. The letter that changed everything he thought he knew. My child, stay here. Because after reading the words, "The truth was never hidden from you. It was hidden for you," he could not immediately open the envelope. The room remained silent. The wooden box remained open. The letters remained stacked carefully inside. Yet somehow, everything felt different. Because suddenly, he realized something. Whoever placed those letters inside the box wanted them discovered. But not immediately. Not years ago. Not by accident. At the right time. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, timing often protects understanding. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The evening remained quiet. A soft lamp illuminated the table. The shadows across the room barely moved. Everything felt still. Almost as though the house itself was waiting. Waiting for the envelope to be opened. Waiting for the next chapter to begin. Jesus speaks softly. Some moments become important because of what they reveal. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Slowly, he opened the envelope. Carefully. Patiently. Respectfully. Because somehow, he felt this deserved attention. The paper inside appeared old. Older than he expected. The handwriting immediately looked familiar. Not because he had seen it recently. Because he had seen it throughout his life. Birthday cards. Holiday notes. Family messages. Encouraging reminders. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, he recognized the handwriting. Immediately. Without hesitation. Archangel Michael says, My child, some things are recognized by the heart before the mind fully understands. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. For several moments, he simply stared at the page. Not reading. Remembering. Remembering laughter. Remembering conversations. Remembering lessons. Remembering moments that seemed ordinary at the time. Yet now felt priceless. Jesus speaks softly. The value of certain moments becomes clearer with time. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Finally, he began reading. The very first sentence immediately captured his attention. The sentence read, If you are reading this, it means you finally opened the box. The room became completely silent. Because somehow, Those simple words felt personal, direct, intentional, as though the letter was reaching across years. As though the writer somehow anticipated this exact moment. The letter continued, line after line, paragraph after paragraph, and each sentence seemed less like a message, and more like a conversation. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, the most meaningful words often feel like conversations rather than instructions. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Then, he reached a sentence that immediately stopped him. The sentence read, There is something important I hope you never forget. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everything slowed down. His breathing, his thoughts, his attention, everything. He continued reading. And the next line surprised him. Very much. Because it did not reveal a secret. It did not reveal hidden information. It revealed wisdom. The letter said, Your greatest inheritance was never going to be something you owned. It was always going to be something you understood. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, the entire journey felt different. Not smaller. Deeper. Jesus speaks softly. Understanding often becomes more valuable than possession. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. For years, he assumed important discoveries would arrive dramatically. Big announcements, major revelations, extraordinary events. Yet the letter suggested something different. The most important discovery might be perspective, a new way of seeing, a deeper understanding of what truly matters. Archangel Michael says, My child, perspective transforms ordinary things into meaningful things. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As he continued reading, his eyes drifted toward the other letters inside the box. Dozens of them. Waiting. Patiently. Quietly. Each one carrying a story. Each one carrying a lesson. Each one carrying a piece of something larger. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, he realized this was not one message. It was a journey. A journey prepared years earlier. Jesus speaks softly. Some lessons are received one page at a time. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As he reflected, his eyes landed on a familiar card resting beside the wooden box. The same message. Again. Return often to what strengthens hope. He smiled softly. Because somehow, the reminder always appeared when it was needed. Some viewers may notice the QR code on screen or the link associated with this message. For some, those resources become places for reflection, prayer, gratitude practices, encouraging conversations, and thoughtful personal growth. Others continue reflecting privately. Both approaches can be meaningful. Because growth often begins with reflection. The letter continued. And then, he reached another sentence that immediately captured his attention. The sentence read, Most people spend their lives searching for what is missing. Very few spend time appreciating what is present. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, those words felt deeply personal. Perhaps they feel personal to somebody listening right now. Because many people focus on what they have not achieved. What they have not received. What they have not completed. While overlooking what already exists. The relationships. The lessons. The opportunities. The growth. The wisdom. The moments. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, appreciation often reveals treasures that frustration overlooks. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The evening continued. The house remained quiet. The lamp continued glowing softly. And then, he reached the final paragraph of the letter. The paragraph was short. Yet somehow, it carried unusual weight. The paragraph read, "When you finish reading this, do not open the next letter immediately. First visit the old cedar chest." The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everything changed again. The old cedar chest? What cedar chest? Why did it matter? And why had it never been mentioned before? Jesus speaks softly. Every answer often points toward another question. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The letter ended. No explanation. No additional details. Only a signature. A familiar signature. A signature that instantly filled the room with emotion. And beneath it, one final handwritten sentence. A sentence so simple, yet so powerful. The sentence read, "The most important thing was never inside this box." The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, the mystery deepened again. What was in the cedar chest? What lesson remained undiscovered? And what could possibly be more important than everything already found? Archangel Michael speaks. My child, some discoveries prepare you for even greater understanding. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As the evening grew quieter, his attention remained fixed on those final words. Because somehow, he knew, the next step would change everything. Comment this word if this message reached your heart. Understanding. And type Part 3. Because Part 3 reveals what was hidden inside the old cedar chest, and why it remained untouched for so many years. Part 3. The cedar chest that nobody opened for years. My child, stay here. Because after reading the words, the most important thing was never inside this box. He could not stop thinking about them. The letter rested on the table. The wooden box remained open. The stack of unopened letters remained beside him. Yet suddenly, none of those things held his attention anymore. Only one thought remained. The cedar chest. The room became completely silent. Because somehow, he knew exactly which cedar chest the letter was referring to. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, some memories wait quietly until the moment they are needed. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The chest sat upstairs, at the end of a hallway, inside a room rarely used anymore. A room that contained old photographs, family keepsakes, books, boxes, and pieces of the past. Nothing dramatic. Nothing mysterious. Just years of memories carefully stored away. Yet somehow, the chest always felt different. Not because of what people knew was inside. Because nobody seemed completely sure. Jesus speaks softly. Sometimes people preserve things because they know they matter, even when they cannot fully explain why. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The evening remained quiet. The house remained still. And slowly, he stood. The letter remained on the table. The wooden box remained open. The lamp continued glowing softly behind him. Yet his attention had already moved elsewhere. Toward the cedar chest. Toward the next clue. Toward the next lesson. Archangel Michael says, My child, meaningful journeys continue one step at a time. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The stairs creaked softly beneath his feet. The hallway remained dim. The familiar family photographs hanging on the wall seemed different tonight. Not because they changed. Because he was seeing them differently. For the first time in years. He slowed down enough to notice them. The smiles. The faces. The moments captured in time. The ordinary days that later became treasured memories. Jesus speaks softly. The moments people treasure most are often ordinary while they are happening. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Eventually, he reached the room. The door opened slowly. Dust floated gently through the light. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Everything remained exactly where it had been for years. Untouched. Quiet. Patient. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, it felt less like storage, and more like a time capsule. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, the past contains lessons, not places to live. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. His eyes moved. Across the room. Boxes. Shelves. Photographs. Old books. Then finally, the cedar chest. Resting beneath a window. Simple. Strong. Beautifully made. And somehow, still carrying a quiet sense of importance. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everything seemed to be leading toward this moment. The letters. The notes. The clues. The memories. Every step. Every discovery. Every lesson. All pointing here. Jesus speaks softly. Preparation often makes important moments possible. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly that reminder tonight. Slowly, he approached the chest. Not rushing. Not assuming. Simply paying attention. The way the letter encouraged. The way wisdom often requires. The way meaningful things deserve. Archangel Michael says, My child, attention is a form of respect. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The lid felt heavier than expected. Not physically. Emotionally. Because he sensed something important waited inside. For several moments, he simply stood there, hand resting on the chest. Thinking. Remembering. Reflecting. Then finally, he lifted the lid. The room became completely silent. Because immediately, he noticed something unexpected. No valuables. No documents. No hidden fortune. No dramatic discovery. Only memories. Photographs. Journals. Cards. Letters. Family keepsakes. Simple things. Yet somehow, they felt priceless. Jesus speaks softly. The most valuable things in life are often impossible to replace. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. For several moments, he carefully examined the contents. One item at a time. Photographs from years ago. Handwritten notes. Birthday cards. Old family recipes. Small reminders of people and moments that shaped an entire family. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, he understood something. The chest was not preserving objects. It was preserving stories. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, stories carry wisdom across generations. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As he continued searching, his eyes landed on something unusual. A small leather journal. Unlike everything else, the journal looked older, more worn, more frequently used. And attached to the cover, was a small folded note. His heart immediately began racing. Because somehow, he knew, this mattered. Very much. The note contained only one sentence. The sentence read, "The answer is not in what they left you. The answer is in what they taught you." The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everything shifted. The journey was changing. The mystery was changing. The focus was changing. Less about objects. More about wisdom. Less about inheritance. More about understanding. Jesus speaks softly. The lessons people leave behind often outlast everything else. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As he reflected, his eyes once again landed on a familiar reminder card tucked between the journal pages. The same message. Again. Return often to what strengthens hope. He smiled softly. Because somehow, that reminder appeared exactly when it was needed. Some viewers may notice the QR code on screen or the link associated with this message. For some, those resources become places for reflection, prayer, gratitude practices, encouraging conversations, and thoughtful personal growth. Others continue their reflection privately. Both paths can be meaningful. Because meaningful growth often begins with reflection. The journal remained in his hands. The room remained silent. And then, he noticed something written across the front cover. Words engraved into the leather. Words worn by time. Yet still readable. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, some lessons become clear only after enough life has been lived. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Slowly, he opened the journal. Turned past years of entries. Turned past countless pages. Turned past memories. Reflections. Lessons. Experiences. And finally, reached the very last page. The room became completely silent. Because written across the top, in large letters, were words that instantly made his heart stop. The words read, "If you are reading this, it is time to start living differently." The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, the journey was no longer about the past. It was about the future. Comment this word if this message reached your heart. Legacy. And type. Part 4. Because Part 4 reveals the final journal entry, and the life-changing lesson hidden inside it for years. Part 4. The final journal entry that waited for the right moment. My child. Stay here. Because after reading the words, "If you are reading this, it is time to start living differently," he could not continue immediately. The journal remained open. The cedar chest remained beside him. The room remained quiet. Yet suddenly, everything felt different. Because those words did not sound like a memory. They sounded like an invitation. An invitation to move forward. An invitation to grow. An invitation to see life differently. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, wisdom becomes powerful when it points toward action. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. For several moments, he simply stared at the page. Thinking. Reflecting. Remembering. Because suddenly, the entire journey began connecting. The wooden box. The letters. The notes. The memories. The cedar chest. The journal. Every step seemed to be leading toward a single lesson. Not about what had been left behind. About what should be carried forward. Jesus speaks softly. The most meaningful legacies are lived, not stored. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Slowly, He lowered his eyes and began reading. The first sentence immediately captured his attention. The sentence read, "You have spent enough time looking backward." The room became completely silent, because somehow those words felt deeply personal. For years, he revisited old memories, old mistakes, old disappointments, old questions, old possibilities. Not because he wanted to remain there, because sometimes the past feels easier to understand than the future. Yet the journal suggested something important. Understanding the past is valuable. Living there is not. Archangel Michael says, "My child, the past can teach you. It cannot lead you forward." Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The entry continued. Each paragraph felt simple, yet powerful. The kind of wisdom that becomes clearer with experience. The next paragraph read, "Do not spend your life waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect moment rarely announces itself. Meaningful moments are often recognized only afterward." The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, those words explained so much. How many opportunities had been postponed? How many conversations delayed? How many goals placed on hold? How many chances ignored while waiting for certainty? Jesus speaks softly. Many meaningful journeys begin before people feel completely ready. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As he continued reading, the atmosphere inside the room seemed to change. Not physically. Emotionally. The journal no longer felt like a record of the past. It felt like guidance for the future. Archangel Michael speaks. "My child, wisdom becomes timeless when it remains relevant across seasons." Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The next section carried a heading. A heading written larger than everything else. The heading read, "The things that matter most." His attention immediately focused. Because somehow, he sensed this section would be important. Very important. The list beneath the heading contained only a few items. Yet each one carried weight. The list read, relationships, character, gratitude, service, hope. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, the simplicity felt profound. No mention of status. No mention of possessions. No mention of comparison. Only the things that continue maturing regardless of circumstance. Jesus speaks softly. The most valuable things often remain valuable throughout every stage of life. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. For several moments, he stopped reading. Not because he was finished. Because he was reflecting. Reflecting on the years. Reflecting on priorities. Reflecting on how easily people become distracted from what truly matters. Archangel Michael says, "My child, attention shapes experience." Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As he reflected, his eyes landed once again on a familiar reminder tucked between the pages. Return often to what strengthens hope. He smiled softly. Because somehow, the message continued appearing exactly when it was needed. Some viewers may notice the QR code on screen or the link associated with this message. For some, those resources become places for reflection, prayer, gratitude practices, encouraging conversations, and personal growth. Others continue reflecting privately. Both approaches can be meaningful. Because growth often begins with intentional reflection. The room remained silent. The journal remained open. And then, he reached another section. A section titled, If I could give you only one piece of advice. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everything felt important. Every word. Every sentence. Every thought. Slowly, he continued reading. The advice appeared beneath the heading. Simple. Direct. Powerful. The advice read. Do not measure your life only by what you accomplish. Measure it by who benefits from your presence. The room became completely silent. Because somehow, those words reached deeper than expected. Not achievements. Impact. Not accumulation. Contribution. Not appearance. Character. Jesus speaks softly. A meaningful life influences others in positive ways. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. For several moments, he simply stared at the page. Because suddenly, the lesson felt clear. The most important thing people leave behind is not what they owned. It is what they gave. Encouragement. Kindness. Wisdom. Hope. Love. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, influence often outlasts possessions. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Then, just as he thought the entry was ending, he noticed something unexpected. A folded section attached to the final page. Hidden. Almost invisible. The room became completely silent. Because somehow, he knew. This was important. Very important. Carefully, he unfolded it. And immediately froze. Because written across the hidden page, in large handwriting, were words that instantly made his heart race. The words read, The final lesson is waiting in the family photo. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everything changed again. A family photo? Which photo? Why did it matter? And what lesson could possibly remain hidden after everything already discovered? Archangel Michael speaks. My child, some answers are visible long before they are understood. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As the evening grew quieter, his attention remained fixed on those words. Because somehow, he knew. The family photo was not just a photograph. It was the final clue. The final lesson. The final chapter of a journey that began with a simple wooden box. Comment this word if this message reached your heart. Purpose. And type. Part 5. Because Part 5 reveals the family photo, and the final lesson that changes everything he believes about what truly matters. Part 5. The family photo that held the final lesson. My child. Stay here. Because after reading the words, the final lesson is waiting in the family photo, he slowly closed the journal. Not because he was finished. Because suddenly, he understood that every step of the journey had been preparing him for this moment. The wooden box. The letters. The cedar chest. The journal. The memories. The conversations. The lessons. Everything. All leading here. To a photograph. A simple photograph. Or so it seemed. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, some of life's greatest lessons hide inside ordinary things. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The room remained silent. The cedar chest remained open. The journal rested beside him. Yet his attention had already moved elsewhere. Toward the photographs. Toward the memories. Toward whatever lesson remained hidden. For several moments, he carefully searched through the chest. Photograph after photograph. Birthdays, celebrations. Family gatherings. Vacations. Ordinary afternoons. Smiling faces. Shared moments. Pieces of life frozen in time. Jesus speaks softly. Photographs preserve moments. Reflection reveals their meaning. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Then, he found it. A photograph different from the others. Not larger. Not newer. Not framed differently. Yet somehow, it immediately captured his attention. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, he remembered it. The day it was taken. The weather. The laughter. The conversation. The feeling. Everything. Archangel Michael says, "My child, some memories remain vivid because they contain lessons." Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. He sat beside the window, holding the photograph, studying every detail, every face, every expression, every small detail that once seemed insignificant. And then, something unexpected happened. He noticed something he had never noticed before. Not hidden writing. Not a secret message. Perspective. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, he stopped looking at who was present, and began thinking about what was present. Connection. Love. Support. Encouragement. Shared experiences. Shared history. Shared moments. Jesus speaks softly. The most valuable things are often visible long before they are appreciated. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. For years, he viewed the photograph as a memory. A picture of people. A picture of a day. A picture of a moment. Yet now, he saw something different. The photograph represented something larger. It represented everything people spent years searching for. Belonging. Connection. Meaning. Purpose. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, the final lesson became clearer. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, many people search far away for what has been near them all along. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The photograph remained in his hands. And slowly, another memory returned. A conversation from years ago. A simple conversation. The kind people rarely realize will matter later. Someone in the photograph had once said, "One day you'll understand that the best part of life isn't what you collect. It's what you share." The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everything connected. The letters. The journal. The advice. The reminders. The wisdom. Every lesson pointed toward the same truth. Not accumulation. Connection. Not possession. Presence. Not status. Relationships. Jesus speaks softly. Life becomes meaningful through connection. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As he reflected, his eyes landed on a familiar reminder card resting beside the cedar chest. The same words once again. Return often to what strengthens hope. He smiled softly. Because somehow, that reminder had accompanied every stage of the journey. Some viewers may notice the QR code on screen or the link associated with this message. For some, those resources become places for reflection, prayer, gratitude practices, encouraging conversations, and personal growth. Others continue reflecting privately. Both approaches can be meaningful. Because meaningful growth often begins with a willingness to pause. The afternoon slowly turned into evening. The sunlight shifted. The shadows lengthened. Yet he remained seated, holding the photograph. thinking, reflecting, understanding. And then, something unexpected happened. A small note slipped from behind the photograph. The room became completely silent. Because somehow, he knew. This was the final message. The final piece. The final lesson. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, every meaningful journey eventually arrives at simplicity. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Carefully, he unfolded the note. The handwriting looked familiar. The same handwriting found throughout the letters. Throughout the journal. Throughout the journey. And the note contained only a few lines. Yet somehow, those few lines carried extraordinary weight. The note read, If you have reached this point, stop searching for what matters most. You already found it. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everything stopped. Not outside. Inside. The note continued. The greatest inheritance is not something people leave to you. It is something they leave within you. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, the lesson became undeniable. The wisdom, the values, the kindness, the perspective, the encouragement, the courage, the hope. Those things remained. Long after objects faded. Long after circumstances changed. Long after years passed. Jesus speaks softly. The most enduring gifts are often invisible. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. For several moments, he simply sat there. Not searching anymore. Not wondering anymore. Not trying to solve another mystery. Because finally, he understood. The journey was never about discovering a secret. It was about rediscovering what mattered. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, clarity arrives when people stop looking beyond the lesson and begin living it. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As evening settled over the house, he carefully returned the photograph to the cedar chest. Placed the journal beside it. Returned the letters. Closed the lid. And smiled. Not because the journey ended. Because the lesson would continue. Every day. Every conversation. Every decision. Every relationship. The lesson would remain. The final note contained one last sentence. A sentence he would never forget. The sentence read, The purpose of this journey was never to change what you own. It was to change how you see. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, that was the answer. The real answer. The answer behind every clue. Every memory. Every letter. Every discovery. Comment this word if this message reached your heart. Legacy. And type. Final chapter. Because the final chapter reveals what happened after he shared the final lesson with his family, and why that conversation changed everyone forever. Final chapter. The conversation that changed the family forever. My child. Stay here. Because after reading the words, the purpose of this journey was never to change what you own. It was to change how you see. He remained completely still. The note rested in his hands. The cedar chest sat quietly beside him. The evening sunlight faded beyond the window. And for several moments, he did nothing. Not because he was confused. Not because he needed more answers. Because suddenly, there were no more mysteries to solve. No more clues to discover. No more hidden messages waiting to be found. Only a lesson waiting to be lived. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, every meaningful journey eventually becomes a choice. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. For years, he believed understanding came from discovering something new. A hidden answer. A forgotten secret. A missing piece. Yet this journey revealed something different. Sometimes understanding comes from finally appreciating what was already present. Jesus speaks softly. Wisdom often appears familiar once it is understood. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly that reminder tonight. The room remained silent. The cedar chest remained closed. The journal remained inside. The photograph remained safely returned. Everything was exactly where it belonged. And somehow, that felt right. Very right. Archangel Michael says, "My child, peace often arrives when people stop searching and start appreciating." Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Slowly, he stood. Not because the journey demanded another step. Because life was waiting. The ordinary evening waiting downstairs. The family waiting downstairs. The conversations waiting downstairs. The moments waiting downstairs. And suddenly, he understood something. The next chapter was not hidden in a box. It was waiting in the people he loved. Jesus speaks softly. The most meaningful chapters are often shared. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The stairs creaked softly beneath his feet. The familiar sounds of home grew louder. Voices. Laughter. Movement. Life. The things people often overlook until they are reminded how valuable they truly are. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, he saw everything differently. Not the house. Not the people. His perspective. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, gratitude transforms ordinary moments. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. When he entered the living room, everyone looked up. Not because they knew what happened. Because they noticed something different. Something calmer. Something lighter. Something peaceful. The kind of peace people cannot easily explain. Jesus speaks softly. Inner peace often becomes visible before it becomes understandable. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The family gathered. Not because he asked them to. Because they wanted to. Because sometimes people sense when a conversation matters. And somehow, everyone felt it. The evening became quieter. More intentional. More attentive. And finally, someone asked, "What did you find?" The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, the answer mattered. Very much. He smiled softly. Then replied, "Not what I expected." The room remained silent. Everyone listened. Carefully. Patiently. Waiting. And then, he began sharing the story. The wooden box. The letters. The cedar chest. The journal. The photograph. The notes. The lessons. Everything. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Honestly. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, truth rarely requires exaggeration. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. As the story unfolded, something unexpected happened. Nobody focused on the objects. Nobody focused on the mystery. Nobody focused on the clues. Instead, everyone focused on the lessons. Because deep down, everyone recognized something familiar. The importance of family. The importance of gratitude. The importance of paying attention. The importance of not postponing meaningful conversations. Jesus speaks softly. People often know what matters most. They simply need reminders. Feel that deeply. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Hours passed. Yet nobody seemed eager to leave. The conversation continued. Stories emerged. Memories resurfaced. Laughter returned. Old moments were remembered. Forgotten experiences were shared. And gradually, the atmosphere changed. Not because circumstances changed. Because perspective changed. Archangel Michael speaks. My child, perspective changes experience. Pause there. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. At one point, his daughter looked toward him and asked, So what was the biggest lesson? The room became completely silent. Because suddenly, everyone wanted the answer. He thought carefully. Very carefully. Then smiled. And finally said, The biggest lesson was that I spent years searching for something valuable. Without realizing I was already surrounded by it. The room became completely silent. Because somehow, everyone understood. Not perfectly, but deeply. The lesson was not about inheritance. Not about hidden documents. Not about forgotten possessions. The lesson was about appreciation. About attention. About gratitude. About connection. Jesus speaks softly. The things people value most are often the things they see every day. Think about that carefully. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. The evening eventually ended. The conversations gradually faded. The lights grew dim. The house became quiet. Yet something remained. A feeling. A perspective. A renewed appreciation for what truly matters. Before going to bed, he returned to the cedar chest one final time. Not because he needed another clue. Not because he expected another discovery. Because he wanted to say thank you. Thank you for the lessons. Thank you for the memories. Thank you for the reminders. Thank you for the perspective. The chest remained silent. Yet somehow, that silence felt meaningful. Because somebody listening needed exactly those words tonight. Before closing the lid, he placed one final note inside. A note written in his own handwriting. A note for whoever might someday discover the chest again. The note read, Do not search for hidden treasure. Search for hidden appreciation. The first changes what you possess. The second changes how you live. The lid closed. The lights turned off. The night became still. And the journey finally ended. Or perhaps, it simply became part of the next chapter. Because every meaningful lesson continues through the people who choose to live it. Jesus speaks softly. Carry wisdom forward, my child. And before you leave tonight, remember these words. Gratitude. Connection. Hope. Courage. Appreciation. Because those 5 companions quietly guided every step of this journey. And perhaps, they can guide yours as well. Comment this word if this message reached your heart. Treasure. And remember, the greatest things in life are rarely hidden. They are simply overlooked. Until wisdom teaches us to see them. The end.